Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Okay, let's close out September with a little bit more out of the introduction to this translation of the Lankavatara Sutra by Daisetsu Taitaro Suzuki. Now, I just got done talking about chanting and what our attitude, what our mind should be when we chant in any situation. And I brought up the three bodies of Buddha, right? And just a quick summation. Buddhism talks about three different aspects of Buddha-ness. Because the only place we can attain this awakening, this Buddha-ness, is in this samsaric physical experience. It's kind of a conundrum, isn't it? Buddha-ness is a shift of perception and therefore a fully realized experience of being life. Not from birth to death, but life from before time to end of time, without time, more accurately, or as you've heard it said, since beginningless time. It's hard to talk about something that is disconnected from time because that also disconnects it from space, right? The two are the same coin. But Buddha-ness is disconnected from our samsaric experience of time and space, which is what allows for our attachment. Through time and space, I am hazel-eyed. Through time and space, I am male. I am female. I am somewhere in between. I'm something other. I'm reptilian. I'm a tree. I'm whatever. The mind that's doing all that jumping around, that's our observer. But in samsara, in the physical realm of the universe, of instantiations moment to moment to moment, our mind, our sentient mind, transgresses quickly from observer to, what's this? What's this? That's mine. That's not mine. I don't want that. I want that. I want more of that. I want all of that. Oh, what's that? Oh, now that I know what that is and not what this is, then that's what I want. I want that. I want more of that. I want this. Constant. You can see why Shakyamuni called it the monkey mind, right? It's like a whole grove of trees full of monkeys all screaming for your attention. Look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me. This is what the samsaric mind does day and night. Even while you're asleep, your mind is categorizing stuff. Oh, I don't need to know that anymore. Oh, that's important. Make sure I don't forget that. Blah, 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 blah. That's a samsaric mind. That samsaric mind is what leads to our identification and therefore possessing. And that possessing instantiate fear of losing that possession, and therefore we manufacture stress, anxiety, worry, complacence, dislikes, likes, avarice, disdain, all of our emotional turmoils, all stem from that obsessive mind. And Buddhism is about establishing a mind devoid of all that. Not annihilating it, not saying, I don't have that cool, shiny car I need to polish this weekend, not pushing away that perfect boyfriend we have with all of his qualities and overlooking the ones we don't like. That all still there, manifesting through time and space. But our Buddha mind, out of time and space, looks upon that as all of it is amazing. None of it is stressing or anxiety, because the true nature of life isn't about those momentary little instantiations. Although they seem to last a long time, everything's just a momentary flash, a manifestation of energies. Nothing is permanent. Nothing lasts. We say this all the time, but we don't really think about what we're saying. From that position of the observer, everything becomes fascinating, and because we now understand the true nature of the big picture, life in big letters, bold, the stresses and the anxieties we see build outside of our experience make us want to encourage and heal those sufferings and anxieties, because all of them exist through a misunderstanding. No. Look, life. Look at life this way. You don't have to. Oh, why are you crying? Why are you suffering? Look. If I could only show you, just think this way. Think this way. Come along with me. Look at the world this way. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that great? Come on. You don't have to do. You're doing that to yourself. That's the work of Bodhisattva. And that can't happen without this apparatus, this physical form of life. It's the only place Buddhahood can manifest. So how do we explain this to people who've never heard of this kind of a thing? So Shakyamuni dissects it into three different ways. Says there's this understanding outside time. That's the teaching. That's the ability we want to nurture and instantiate so that we can relieve ourselves. I know, chuckle. But release ourselves, emancipate ourselves, liberate ourselves from that churning of attachment and time and space and quiescence, yeah? Yeah, but where the hell is that in my mind? Well, it exists right here in your time machine. Your existence is a time machine. It is perceiving increments, minute increments of time. But your brain is too slow to recognize that they're instances. And you just connect them all like it's all one thing. And that way you delude yourself in permanence. Right? When you're a kid, oh my God, I'm going to die. My mom's going to kill me. Why? For something you did in a few instances that could have gone any one of a million different ways, but now you're going to make it permanent. I can never get rid of this. Suffering, right? But your Buddha-ness, your mind of understanding of life, says, well, what are you doing? Stop doing that. That's silly. But we're not taught to use that part of our mind. So Shakyamuni says, well, this body, this provisional apparatus that a mind emerges from, it's a requisite thing for you to get this perspective. So we'll call this the accommodative body, or the manifest body. Accommodative is actually a better word, because all this body, this physical universe does is accommodate realization. Because Buddhahood can only happen in this physical realm, samsara, then understand that it's necessary to have that freed mind. And by the way, when you finally get it, when you finally go, oh, Buddhahood, then this accommodative body, along with your human mind, your sentient mind, suddenly feel a great, great weight lifted off of you. Oh, that is nirvana. That is emancipation. That is liberation. Not, as this author insists, is salvation. You want salvation, go to what's it called? A salvation yard, right? Go look at what they do with junk to turn it into something else. Salvation is not a good word. And you'll see it in a lot of translations. It slips in there from cultural norms of religion, which Buddhism is not. Emancipation, liberation, that's something we do with ourselves, our minds, our own thoughts. That's more accurate. So what have I identified there? 3 bodies. Are they real bodies? Is there a supermodel body and a hippopotamus body and a wishing well body? No. What we're describing here is awakening. The 3 bodies of Buddha. Accommodative, reward, dharma. The dharma is simply the truth of what's really occurring. But in order for you to get that into your head, you need to first detach yourself from the physical body that's constantly giving you stuff to put in your time machine and grind away at life. And when you get that observational reality, then this samsaric body has weight lifted off of it. It can exist now without the auspices of all these attachments and suffering and anxiety and stress. It's rewarded. Now, was the language of those 3 bodies of Buddha around at the time of the Lankavatara? I believe it was. I believe it's been there since the Hinayana teachings. It just wasn't applied the same way. It wasn't applied with the clarity needed in order to perceive it correctly. You and I live in a time where it's easy for us to make that mind shift. Not as easy 24/7 as we'd like it to be, which is why we need to chant, right? But certainly much easier for us to conceive of than it was for people 3,000, 2,000, 1,500 years ago. Yes? But even 500 years ago, it was the beginning of the age of the degeneration, the Mappo age. So they had the capacity to do it. But there were a lot of systems, government systems, social systems in place that crushed that thinking, crushed by virtue of forcing people to obsess to rules and thingness and time and space. Yeah? So, when he says, while the Trikaya dogma is not yet fully developed in the Lanka, each member of the Trinity is traceable in such ideas as the Dharamata Buddha, the Vipaka Buddha, the Nirmana Buddha. The notion of the transformation body inevitably follows from the Buddha's desire to save the ignorant whose minds are not yet enlightened enough to see straight away into the essence of Buddhahood. All of that word salad is about what I've been trying to describe to you. This idea that Buddha-ness is a nature that we all inherently have, but we have this huge overgrown cornfield of other social, interactive, time-space attachments obfuscating our experience of it. As they are not yet clear-sighted, something is to be devised to lead them to the right path. And this something must be in accord with their mentalities, their capacity. If not, they are sure to go astray farther and farther. You give somebody a kernel of knowledge that they can't possibly grasp, then they'll turn it into new creative obstacles, and then you'll have a much harder and harder time getting them to understand correctly. This was the fence that Shakyamuni and other scholars since have tried to navigate, right? If they're not capable of grasping Buddhatattva as it is, let them have something of it and gradually develop it. Give them something to grab onto that at least leads them in the right direction, right? The theory of upaya, or skillful means, is also the theory of manomaya kaya, the will body. Give them the volition to move toward, even though they don't understand what they're moving toward yet, right? Give them, replace their earthly desires with something more transcendent, right? Early Buddhism, early Mahayana. As the incarnation of a great compassionate heart, the Buddha ought to be able to take any form he wishes when he sees the sufferings of sentient beings. Now that's a reference to, I don't even like the way that was worded, but there's this idea in some schools of Buddhism, I'll say, that perceive of a physical instantiation of that three-bodied idea. That the Dharma-bodied Buddha is something that floats around on a lotus flower around you. You see what I'm saying? Trying to make physical what isn't physical. The will body is a part of the Buddha's plan of world salvation. There's that stupid word that doesn't belong in Buddhism. It's not salvation. It's emancipation. You see the difference? Salvation is something, is a helping hand reaching down in the mud and pulling you out. That's religion. No, that's religion. Emancipation is something you do for yourself. Remember, Buddhism is about the mind, attitude, and intent. Can you get out of your own way, or are you just going to sit there and wait to die until something else comes along and goes, I'll save you? What the hell is that? Have you just given up on life entirely, and now you're going to be totally dependent on somebody else making you of some kind of value? Salvation, please. This is one of the reasons why Buddhism is often regarded as polytheistic and at the same time pantheistic. Again, this author is wrestling with the idea that Buddha is some kind of savior. Why not call him Jesus Christ then? Or Muhammad? Or Eloan? Or whatever? That's absolute nuts. This language that's being utilized right now. But, that's it. That's this paragraph. So, obviously, not a tremendous amount of thought went into this. Sorry, Daisetsu Taitaro Suzuki. Sorry. there's no, see, he says, often regarded as polytheistic, and at the same time pantheistic. No, there's no theism in it. That's the primary error here. The idea that Buddha is some heavenly being. Buddha is the mind. Your mind. My mind. Yeah, if you want to pull yourself out of the mud, you're using your mind, but it's not a separate entity. It is of your cognition. You're choosing to see clearly the nature of life rather than being attached to emotions and conundrums and I can't surpass this, I can surpass that, I can't, judgments. Those are all attachments. Those are the monkeys. The Bodhisattva and his 10 vows. So now we leave that because obviously the author is having struggles and he just wants to briefly touch on that as part of the Mahayana teachings, but obviously he hasn't gotten them entirely. Certainly not from the perspective of the Lotus Sutra. So maybe he's spent his entire scholarship on the Lankavatara. Maybe he's a Theravada Buddhist. Maybe he's a Zen Buddhist. And for him, this is where the path gets blurry. And so he just wants to get past it. But we see far more clearly, don't we? So now he's going to jump to the Bodhisattva and his 10 vows. Well, the Bodhisattva has been talked about a lot longer in all of Mahayana. So maybe he'll settle into something that he finds more relatable, albeit limited in his understanding. You and I aren't limited because we're Lotus Sutra practitioners. And this person, the Lotus Sutra was around when he wrote this book, but obviously didn't pay much attention to it. So let's go on. In Mahayana Buddhism, the Buddha is not the only agent who is engaged in the work of enlightening or, saving the world. Well, neither are you and I. We don't want to save the world. We want to emancipate, get it out of its own way. Liberate it from its deluded thinking. While he is able to transform himself into as many forms as are required by sentient beings, he is also assisted by his followers or sons, talk about religion, putra, satu, or sutta, or aurasa, as they are called in the Mahayana Sutras. So do you see the basic illusion that is escaping this author? Enlightenment, as you and I talk about it, Buddha-ness, comes in as many forms as there are sentient minds. Because each of us experiences life, the entirety of life, through our own karmic filters. Some things appear to us very bright and in our face, while to others, it just passes by as a glimpse. It means our understanding, our worldview, our experience, though there are many similarities, all vary in intensity, understanding, depth of experience. Stating the obvious? I think so. So Buddhist literature, experience, expedient means, all the various stories, is a conversation about how different we all are, yet all commonly experience life in its universal application, albeit through tendencies and conditions specific to each and every sentient mind. Ultimately, all of those sentient minds, no matter how many billions of them there are, can come to this same experience that is all life, Buddha-ness. It's our common thread, and our emancipation from all the delusions of those other karmic instantiations. Why then does this author insist that all of those forms are actual formations of Buddha? They're not. They're formations of wisdom of each sentient mind focusing in on Buddha. Buddha is Buddha. You don't have yours as separate from mine. You have your path to Buddha as separate from my path to Buddha. But when we practice together, whether in the same room or the same world or the same universe, we are many in body, tendencies and conditions, karmic manifestations, yet one in mind, because there is only one life. Unless you're in a separate universe, send me your mailing address. Bodhisattvas are thus the sons of the Buddha and apply themselves most arduously and most assiduously to the cause of Buddhism. So if you want to say in these words that you understand that sons of Buddha are basically the condition of Bodhisattva in samsara that is focused on the one Tathagata, the oneness of Buddha life, okay, but I think that's forcing the issue. I think these words are doing a disservice. If that's what it means, then say what it means. Don't assign these words of son of the Buddha a very samsaric way of looking at the mind. In fact, the actual work of, I'm going to stop saying it, but here I keep running into salvation. I don't want to keep promoting this terrible language. So, in fact, the actual work of world emancipation, world, are we emancipating the mountain? No, we're emancipating sentient minds. So, the actual work of sentient mind emancipations, we can say, is carried on by these spiritual soldiers. Oh, here we go with the military thing. Under the leadership of the Buddha. Man, there's so much wrong with this. Are we spiritual soldiers? Or are we simply practicing the purifying of our mind, a clear, timeless understanding of life? That makes us the prime influence to everything around us. And our environment or world will reflect our efforts at clarity, at Buddha-ness. Is that under the leadership of the Buddha? See, again, the Buddha is not Shakyamuni or anyone else. The influence or the leadership is from our own Buddha-ness, our own clarity of mind. This is very, very poorly stated. If that's the way this author perceives Buddha and Bodhisattvas, we're going to see this appear throughout this text, right? The latter is sometimes felt to be too remote, too serene, too superhuman, and his sight is often lost in the midst of our worldly struggles. Now, I can make that sentence work, but I just don't think it's a good sentence. It's exactly what I was saying earlier in a way, if you want to interpret it that way. The latter is sometimes the Buddha, is sometimes felt to be too remote, too serene, too superhuman, and his sight is often lost in the midst of our worldly struggles. Well, it's not his sight, it's yours. We need to stop referring to Buddha as something outside ourselves. Again, Nichiren, don't look for Gohonzon anywhere outside yourself. That is where Buddha lies, in your mind. And sometimes we get so caught up in our everyday attachments and dramas and emotions, our Buddha-ness, your Buddha-ness, your experience of Buddha seems unreachable. That, I could make that sentence work with all of those provisos. But it's your Buddha-ness. It's not some outside thing that you're saying, you're too far away. No, it's your own mind. Which is why when we chant Namo Myo Renge Kyo, we say, I, here, now enlightened, Buddha. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. That's why. But the Bodhisattva is always with us. With us? Again, he's anthropomorphizing a state of mind. He's saying Bodhisattva is another guy. Well, a son of this guy, Buddha. That's total delusion. That's samsaric logic, not Buddhist logic. You see? And ever ready to be our confidant, for he is felt by us to share the same passions, impulses, and aspirations, which are such great, disturbing, though ennobling too, forces of our human life. Because the Bodhisattva is you, not some alternate ego or personality. The verbiage of these sentences, it's all wrong. It starts from misunderstanding what Buddha is, and then he transmits it into an imaginary being called Bodhisattva, like it's a good angel or a bad angel on our shoulders. That, my folks, is religion bullcrap. Buddhism takes place right here in our minds, not here in the skull or brain, in our emergent property, mind. And each one of us has the same porthole. What do we call the portal? Gohonzon. See, that didn't exist back here in the Lankavatara. So it's no wonder he's missing it all, right? To state the truth, sentient beings are all bodhisattvas. Oh, somebody turn a light on. Now the language is much more clear, isn't it? But this person is befuddled. To state the truth, sentient beings are all bodhisattvas, however ignorant and ready to err they may be. They are all Jinaputras, the sons of the victorious, and harbor in themselves every possibility of attaining enlightenment. He's starting to shift his language more toward what we all know. So where did he go for the last two paragraphs? That's kind of that, and you wonder why people get confused studying Buddhism. The bodhisattvas who have gone up successfully all the rungs of the Bhumi ladder and who are thus capable of extending their help over us are really our own brethren, our own selves. Therefore, Mahamati of the Lanka opens his questions generally with this, quote, I and other bodhisattvas, etc. Mahamati is our mouthpiece, voicing our wants and aspirations. I think where my time was. Oh, I got time. So that's an important point, finally, for the author to speak to his translation. He's saying the setup here of the Lankavatara Sutra is a stand-in for our own questions to Buddha to be resolved, to be led, to be taught. So whenever we read Mahamati then says, that's you and I. That's the device, the skillful means of the Lankavatara Sutra. It's an interlocution between all of us and Buddha-ness. Interesting proposal. Now, having read that, this sutra now has a different appeal, doesn't it? He's been speaking generally about Mahayana's concepts. Now he's directing them toward this actual sutra. He continues, thus is not the place to consider historically how the conception evolved in Buddhism, whose primitive object seems to have consisted in the realization of arhatship. But we can state this, that the essence of bodhisattvahood is an unequivocal affirmation of the social, altruistic nature of humankind. Whatever enlightenment one gains, it must be shared by one's fellow beings. This idea is classically expressed in the Mahayana by the so-called, quote, 10 vows of the Samantabhadra, end quote. The Bodhisattva is a man of inexhaustible vows. Without these, he is not himself. To save the world, to emancipate minds in the world, to bring all his fellow beings up to the same level of thought and feeling where he himself is, and not to rest, not to enter into nirvana until this is accomplished. How infinitely long and how inexpressively arduous the task may be. This is the Bodhisattva, vowing to save all beings, which is technically known as Purva Pradinana in Mahayana terminology, cannot even for a moment be separated from the life of the Bodhisattva. The Buddha, being surrounded by these noble-minded sons, cannot fail finally to realize all beings from the bondage of karma and ignorance and thirst for life. With this in view, he is always inspiring the Bodhisattvas with his sovereign power and sustaining them in their efforts to bring enlightenment in the whole triple world. All right. I don't know how much of that I need to transliterate. But if you've been following along so far, to me anyway, it's quite obvious. What he's stating there is that the Buddha, not some arch general who's leading his minions or sons into battle, but our very Buddha-ness, Buddha mind, Buddha experience of the Dharma, Myoho Renge Kyo, is what leads our lives of bodhisattva-ness, bodhisattvahood, as he's saying, to engage with the sentient minds of the world and the entire universe, to experience the totality of life that is within every single packet of energy throughout all time, certainly to be perceived right now by the individual entities, tendencies, and conditions of sentient minds in human form and non-human, but let's just stick with the mind, yeah? Whew, I need something to drink. My throat's parched. All right. So we're getting a better look at our author here. And we also got a really good insight into the way he's going to present this Lotus Sutra, or Lankavatara Sutra, yeah? So it should be an interesting dialogue. And you can believe that as we get into it, I'm going to be highly attuned to seeing where his slippery opinions might manifest themselves into this interlocution. I think you know me enough by now, if you've watched any number of these videos. Not a whole lot will get past me. In the meantime, abundant thanks and gratefulness for your participation here. Don't forget to like, subscribe. Patrons, amazing. Take care of your health. Be kind to yourself. and I'll see you in the next one, okay? Bye-bye for now.